What if hindi natatapos ang kwento natin even after we die? And the only thing in my mind was the curiosity of wanting to know and to check if the story of a life filled with hopes, dreams, tragedy, and unanswered questions are not just written in news headlines, but what if they're also written in the skies above? So ako usually, wala naman talaga akong pakialam sa mga ganito. But for some reason, this really captivated me. So just to fill you in, earlier today, I saw this news. And it made me think, why after all of these years, actually decades, why after all of these decades, bigla na lang ulit na pag-uusapan, why all of a sudden, the issue of what had happened 30 years ago, almost, I think, or more than, suddenly reaches back, suddenly just pushes itself through the collective awareness. I feel like this is a good example, how astrology can actually help us understand ourselves, our lives, what we're going through, to be able to navigate much better, siguro, than how we can possibly can without it. So before anything, guys, I'm not asking you to believe anything I say. I'm just simply allowing my curiosities to stimulate me, and I hope it stimulates you as well. So in this video, what we're going to do is we're going to try to read and interpret Pepsi Paloma's birth chart, astrology birth chart, to try to see what possibly could have happened during the time of her life, during the time she was alive, and what could have happened as she went closer to the end of her life. And again, astrology, I'm not asking you to believe it, but if it makes sense for you, maybe you could also check your own chart. All right, so we are looking at the birth chart of Pepsi Paloma. She was born on July 17, 1966. And since hindi natin alam kung ano ba exact birth time niya, we are estimating and we are using a noontime chart. So we use 12 p.m. as her stand-in birth time. So we're not really sure if this is exactly how the house system appears, how the chart exactly appears, but for the most part, this gives us a deeper understanding of who Pepsi Paloma is, behind the story, behind the modern lores about her. So I just want to point this out. Astrology, it's not a fortune-telling device. Kahit sa tarot, yan yung sinasabi ko. What astrology is, though, it is literally a map. And it is also a mirror to our own consciousness. It helps us see the bigger picture, and it helps us understand all the patterns in our lives, all the collective themes, and how it connects to us, how it relates to us, and inevitably how we also relate to ourselves and the world. All right, so let's dive straight into her chart, and we can see here that her sun is in Cancer. And by the way, when you hear people say, and I'm pretty sure na narinig nyo na to at siguro natanong nyo na rin to sa ibang tao, itong question na, anong zodiac sign mo? So basically, when you hear people ask you, or when you ask this to your friends or to anyone, what you're basically asking them is, what is your sun sign? And basically, your sun sign is who you are. It's basically the essence of who you are as your identity, as this personality, as this ego. It's basically like your main character avatar. If we can put into perspective that, let's say Earth is like a video game. So literally, like your sun sign, it's your main avatar character. And because Pepsi has her sun in Cancer, this tells us that she has a very nurturing energy. She's very intuitive. She basically feels her emotions very deeply, and she also feels the emotions and the energy of her surroundings very deeply. One thing we can try to imagine is that like a crab. You know how crabs appear to be tough. Their shell very hard and sturdy, but inside it's really just soft flesh crab meat. And that's how cancers are. And if you could also think about your friends who were born sometime around June 22 to July 22, yung mga Cancer people. So basically, yung sun ni Pepsi, it's at 24 degrees Cancer. And this tells us that she felt things very deeply and had a strong sense of connection to her, alam mo ba, parang internal world, yung world of her emotions. Cancer is also often tied to family. It's also often tied to ancestral karma and patterns. But on a practical level, this tells us that she was very family oriented, and probably like her family was a big part of who she is as a person. And while she is a very nurturing presence to the people around her, this degree, which at 24 degrees, suggests na may pagka-mature ang themes ng kwento ng buhay ni Pepsi. So she could have experienced a lot of emotions, a lot of probably throughout her upbringing, experiences that were far beyond emotions na hindi para sa 18-year-old girl or young lady. And also, itong degree na to, this gives us a bit of a karmic insight. Think about it that probably she had a lot of past life lessons that she, in a way, needed to resolve in her present life. And who knows, maybe she did. Maybe how she, and how maybe she got the lessons that she needed to learn, even for the short amount of time that she lived on Earth, on this planet. Okay, now let's look into the aspects of her sun. And the first immediate thing that I'm seeing or I'm looking at is that her sun has a trine with Saturn in 29 degrees. And having your sun trine to Saturn at this very, very late degree, which is 29 degrees, which is the last degree before it shifts into another sign, it means like as if she was actually reaching the end of a long karmic cycle, I do feel like she really carried the weight of a lot of people, around her. May pagka-self-sacrificial energy kasi si Pisces. And with her sun having this trine, with Saturn in Pisces, she could have been groomed to become a family provider. Supposing that she was born at noontime, then her Saturn would be in the 6th house. And that could tell us, especially later once we look into her moon, how she could have been groomed to become the family provider at a very young age. So maraming pressure yung nasa balikat ni Pepsi. And she could have developed a sense of obligation, to become like the breadwinner of her family. When we're talking about Pisces, her, and also when we're talking about moon, and later papasukin pa natin more deeply yung aspects ng moon and Saturn and Chiron. But in Pisces, she could have felt like as if a part of her childhood was sacrificed, either for fame or for money or for whatever. Basically, she had a very karmic connection. She has a very karmic connection to her mom, to her mother. Okay, let's see. Okay, let's go into her sun aspect. All right, so now let's go into her sun trine Chiron at Pisces as well, and at 26 degrees. Some astrologers say that especially Saturn, sun ang pinag-uusapan natin, and when it's in the later degrees, it could indicate that they are old souls and that they have learned a lot of lessons that they need to learn in past lives, and maybe kailangan lang nilang daan itong lifetime na to just for a short while to have their clearance signed. Because again, we're talking about Chiron, and we're talking about Pisces, and how it's communicating or interacting with her sun sign, which is her personality. I feel like she could have attracted a lot of overgivers, a lot of love bombers, if you know what I mean. And siguro she was meant to learn how to put up boundaries. I feel like that could have been a lesson, that she was meant to learn. She could have learned it. She could have not learned it. We don't know. She could have attracted a lot of love bombers. And maybe that's what got her into dangerous situations, if you know what I'm talking about. She definitely was given the lessons of learning how to say no. And maybe, just maybe, it was a bit too late when it happened. Okay? I feel like she could have been prone to become very overwhelmed with her emotions just because of how, Cancer is like overpowered here. With a stellium, we have Sun, we have Jupiter, Let's talk about that later. We have Sun, we have the Jupiter, we have the Moon, we have Mars in Cancer. So we have 4 planets in Cancer. And we have Jupiter, which is basically like a planet that expands everything along its path. She could have absorbed a lot of the family's pain, a lot of the family's struggle, She could have felt the need to help the family at a young age. So she could have neglected a lot of her needs. She could have neglected a lot of the nurturing she needed, because she had this instinct, to nurture other people, to provide for other people. So there could have been like self-sacrifice expectations sa kanya din, that could have been heavily placed by the people around her, especially in her home. Again, I'm talking about itong aspect ni Moon and Saturn and Mars. The Moon in Cancer is conjuncting Mars, also in Cancer. And those two planets are squaring both Saturn and Chiron in Pisces. So for those people who are already quite familiar with astrology, we can already like have a glimpse or parang a bit of an understanding kung anong klaseng dynamic siguro yung pinagdaanan ni Pepsi from her childhood, from her house, her home until she became famous and became the actress that she was known today. So if we're dealing with the moon, which what we're going to talk about now, the moon is basically the emotional side in astrology. It's basically how you feel. It's your soul, right? It's your emotions. When it's next to Jupiter, it makes your emotions much bigger. It makes your emotions much more powerful, much more expansive. But because her moon is also conjunct to Mars, which is ano ba si Mars? In mythology, Mars is the god of war. It makes this energy of the moon being amplified by the power of Jupiter volatile, chaotic, destructive in a way. Because nandiyan na, okay, we have talked about Jupiter, we've talked about the moon, we've talked about Mars being in Cancer, being next to each other. And it's also next to the sun, which could have resulted into whatever she dealt with emotionally. Either she healed what she needed to heal, or pinabayaan niya na lang her pain, her wounds, her experiences becomes a huge part of who she thinks she is. So if she thinks that she's trapped, she is trapped. If she thinks that she has the power to heal, she has the power to heal. But if she is surrounded with a lot of negative people, or that could have influenced her or could have placed her in situations that are not good, basically makes things harder, right? So now we're looking into her moon. We're looking more deeper into her moon, and we find that her moon is in Cancer at 10 degrees. So though she may have the maturity, Cancer's maturity to be precise, in her sun sign, because it is at 24 degrees. Her moon, however, meaning how she feels, how she handles her emotions, how she surfs the waves of her internal world, is quite not there yet. So while she is very intuitive, while she can feel deep emotions, the early Cancer degree can reflect na parang unfiltered, raw, emotional energy that also makes her incredibly, incredibly intuitive, but also incredibly vulnerable and gullible and receptive, even if sometimes hindi na okay. So in short, I feel like if I were to know someone in right now who has this exact same chart, I would think na madali itong manipulahin, itong taong to, because she's very receptive. Kumbaga, if you know how to sway emotions, if you know how to, alam mo yun, mangilite, if you know kung paano mangilite, you could definitely manipulate a person with this type of chart. So another thing that I want to talk about, as we're talking about her moon, is the conjunction with Mars at 4 degrees. So yung Mars niya at 4 degrees Cancer has a conjunction with the moon at 10 degrees Cancer. So this aspect shows us emotional conflict. But I'm also seeing that her mom or her mother, her connection to her mother could have played a role into how her life was manifested. Also, the thing is, in astrology, if you want to know how someone's relationship is with their mother, you look into their moon sign. Like how if you want to look into the relationship or the interaction of energies between someone and their father, you look into the sun sign or into Saturn. So basically, her mom could have played a supportive but flawed role in her life, justifying siguro the decisions that placed Pepsi in harmful situations. But I do feel like for whatever reasons, okay, her actions were likely shaped by siguro we can say pressures, like let's say financial needs or societal expectations or the role you play in your family role. So basically, her chart points out that her mother could have been indirectly complicit, failing to protect Pepsi from the dangers that she was exposed to. And the main reason why I even began curious or began to ask myself what her chart possibly could show is because I wanted to know why she and her story is suddenly resurfacing again after all these decades. And I feel like it's because she's not done. She's not done. Wait until we get to the transits. Makikita natin kung how perhaps the current planetary alignments are actually influencing her karmic retribution. I feel like, with Mars sitting on the topmost part of her chart, again, if assuming that this is somehow correct, her birth time, if she was born at noon, the goddess of war in this case, she's not playing. She's here to get what she's owed. And I feel like yung mga mananagot sa kanya is basically, and because the natal Mars also has an aspect with Saturn and Chiron, I feel like this is still part of her soul story. It's not yet finished. It's karmically, kumbaga, hindi pa tapos yung kontrata ni Pepsi and whoever are involved. The story is yet to be finished. Hindi pa the end. And also, once we get into her Pluto placements and yung transit ng Pluto ngayon and her Uranus, Virgo Uranus, also shifting signs, I feel like mas maiintindihan natin that there is a bigger story happening. And I feel like itong nangyayari that this director wants to make a movie about her and her life. And it's quite controversial, honestly. I feel like it's really just a catalyst to get this idea, this story, back to the mainstream collective awareness because she is still looking for justice. Hindi pa tapos ang kwento ni Pepsi. And it's really evident in her chart and in the transits of her chart, which I feel like we should go into. Let's go into her Pluto. Yung Pluto niya nasa Virgo. So her Pluto being in Virgo, it's very patient. It's willing to wait many, many years. With Pluto being in Virgo, basically Pluto is the planet of transformation. It's the planet of revolution. And it's in Virgo, so it means that it doesn't really mind lying dormant for God knows how long, as long as everything is being alchemized, is being, alam mo yun, cooked to perfection. And in this case, her justice is being cooked to perfection. She might not receive her legal justice, but I do feel like she wants her social justice. Pluto, if again this chart is accurate, sitting next to her natal Pluto is her natal Uranus, which is basically electrical energy. In astrology, Uranus rules sudden changes, quick changes. Alam niyo yun, yung sudden abrupt shift of energy, literal shift of energy. Like Uranus is pure energy. So now, tingnan natin nasan si Pluto ngayon, nasan si Uranus ngayon, to understand why all of a sudden bigla na lang natin pinag-uusapan yung kanyang kwento ulit. And we can see that her Pluto is transiting in Aquarius. Again, if this chart is correct, kumbaga, how we perceive the story, siguro maybe kulang-kulang, and her Pluto is demanding us to know the whole story. When things were fresh after everything that happened in her life, maybe the big truths of what happened, how she led herself to do what she did, which is, ending her life. I feel like the things that were once hidden cannot be hidden anymore. So it seems highly appropriate and highly probable that her Pluto will be revolutionizing how we see her story, how we understand what happened in the past. And I feel like, ayan na, nauungkat na yung kwento. People are starting to react. Just earlier, one of the persons involved filed a case against that director. So it looks like things are moving. Energy is shifting. What was once hidden from public consciousness or public perception, now being raised, especially for the new generations to also get a look into. So kung ano man yung hindi na-resolve back in 1985, I feel like now it's being resolved. And again, this is how we can see that karma is real. And, in an astrology chart, karma is literally represented by Saturn, and it's being activated right now. Kasi as Mars transits into Cancer, it's activating the Cancer stellium. And ano ba yung mga planets sa Cancer na ma-activate as Mars transits into Cancer? Her sun, meaning how we see her story, her life story will be affected. Her moon, basically the memories of her. The moon also rules over memories. So how we see, how we remember her is also being activated. It's also being revolutionized. Of course, Mars is the planet of destruction. So it's destroying prior knowledge, what we think we know about the story, because there is a karmic retribution happening. Saturn is basically overseeing, a lot of this shift with its aspects to most of the planets in Cancer. And then si Chiron, which is the soul wound. The thing is, Pluto exposes what's hidden and it drives transformation. It's really all about dismantling yung corrupt systems. It's rebalancing injustice. And I feel like if Pepsi was injustified, if she was oppressed by higher hierarchies and societal structures, I feel like Pluto waited a long time for this. So in a way, walang pakialam yung Pluto niya kahit decades siya maghintay after her death. She'll get her social justice. She'll get whatever justice she can get. So with Pluto in Virgo, this placement focuses on precision, on basically exposing systemic abuse, especially that Saturn is in the 6th house, squaring the moon and Mars. So in a way, we can see that there is systemic abuse that's highly evident in the chart. And the thing is, as Pluto is conjuncting Uranus supercharges Pluto's energy. Pluto, it's like a very powerful battery. Tapos Uranus, ito yung parang defibrillator. Yung battery, defibrillator mo pa. Ganon. Super explosive. So expect that this news will only get more louder and louder. Pag-uusapan pa to ng mga tao. When Uranus goes into Gemini, that's in a few months. And I say that because Uranus, when it goes into Gemini, it basically zaps, the internet. So maraming shocking news in the internet. We can expect that when Uranus goes into Gemini. So much more, actually more on finances, the shift in financial systems ang inaabangan ko. But for Pepsi and her story, I feel like mas maliliwanagan pa to when Uranus shifts into Gemini sometime this year. Now, let's try to understand her even more. I'm looking into her Mars. And with her Mars at 4 degrees Cancer, I feel like she has struggles, to express herself outwardly. So medyo paloob yung kulo, if you get what I mean. Maybe she needed a support system, to have processed what she could have processed. But I feel like because of her tensioned relationship with her mother, resulting from the pressure, the pressure that she gets from her mom, probably, as we see in her chart, she could have not felt safe anywhere. She did not have a sense of having a safe space to have someone to talk to open up to, not even her family. I feel like she really felt isolated. She really felt disconnected, dissociated from all the people around her, from all the people who loves her. And I feel like that could be one of the driving things that ultimately led her to doing what she did. At early degrees in Cancer, pag yung Mars, again, raw emotional responses rather than calculated action. So I feel like once her strong emotions overpower her, she doesn't have the means to control her emotions anymore. And it could drive her to do things that are unspeakable. Okay, I want to talk about Saturn squaring Mars. So again, her Saturn in Pisces at 29 degrees is squaring Mars at 4 degrees in Cancer. And what this tells us is that she could have silenced her own inner fighter, if that makes sense. I feel like because she was exposed to systemic oppression. Kumbaga, her main form of abuse is systemic oppression. As we also see in the dynamics of her Saturn and Chiron, I feel like she had developed a mindset or a coping mechanism to oppress herself. So I feel like she learned how to be her own bully. She learned how to be her own oppressor. And I feel like this is something that she did not want, on a conscious level, but I feel like this is what she learned on a subconscious level. Again, we're dealing with Moon and Mars conjunct in Cancer. So it's very deep. This is so deep. Now, her Mars is also trining Neptune, and her Neptune is in 19 degrees Scorpio. And again, if we have assumed her birth time correctly, then her Neptune would be in the first house. Yikes. And for those people who know about who knows astrology, you know that Scorpio is also the sign of death and rebirth. And with Neptune being in the first house, she could have lived her life with her sense of perspective highly distorted. It's as if she never really saw the beautiful world and what the beautiful world has to offer. Her Neptune has a trine with the sun, with Jupiter and the moon. So ito yung sabi natin minsan na hindi porket trine, hindi porket blue line ay maganda na. Dito natin makikita that somehow her Neptune in Scorpio, which is an intense energy to have. It's intense. It's if this is blurred visions, it's not just astigmatism. This is freaking catarata. Cataracts to. Kumbaga may cataracts ka, you're not seeing the world clearly. And it's highly expanded. Nalaki pa yung energy ng blurred lines. So how she could have seen herself, how she could have seen the world around her, how she could have seen the people around her could have been highly distorted. I feel like the Saturn and Moon trining Neptune, she literally allowed her trauma to become herself, to become a part of her. Now, focusing on Jupiter, and as we've discussed kanina, anything that Jupiter touches or anything that Jupiter interacts with, it expands it either for the good or for the not so good. And her Jupiter is in Cancer at 15 degrees. It has, again, a trine with Neptune. It also has a conjunction with the Moon. It has a square with Saturn and Chiron. What else mong meron? Yeah, for the most part, Jupiter made Pepsi's emotional world much more complicated. So, ito yung masabi natin. Sometimes, Jupiter is really a very, very good planet to have, in certain placements. But for stuff like this, although may mga positive qualities pa rin naman na makukuha from having Jupiter along the mix of this Cancer stellium, it's really just more volatile. And, for some people who does not have the support system that someone needs to understand what they're going through, especially in their emotional world, it can be very destructive and volatile. And I think hindi lang talaga nag-guide si Pepsi ng mga tao sa paligid niya. Okay, now we're going into the North Node. So her North Node right now is, her North Node is currently positioned exactly where her natal Saturn and Chiron is. So in a way, destiny is pulling us to acknowledge the injustice we are being called to. Kumbaga, before she's able to go to her next evolutionary cycle, meaning yung soul ni Pepsi, before she's able to go to heaven, we must pass the gates of Saturn and Chiron, which is to acknowledge her soul wound. What yung pinakamalaking wound niya when she was still living, when she was still alive. And again, because North Node is also, by the way, Neptune is also sitting next to North Node. So it's clearing up, I feel. It's clearing up what needs to be cleared up. So I feel like the North Node and Neptune conjuncting right now, along where Saturn and Chiron is at in her natal chart. This is literally her asking or demanding for karmic retribution. This is karma at play. And again, we have to consider her Mars is also sitting at the topmost part of her chart, activating Cancer. Or it doesn't matter, even if nasa gilid yan. What matters is Mars is shaking up Cancer, in which in her natal chart has a stellium, has a very powerful stellium connected to her karma and to her wounds, her soul wounds. And right now, I feel like, again, going back to the transits, as Pluto shifts into Aquarius, it will meant to revolutionize how we understand her story. A lot of what was once hidden must come into the light, and expect more information to come forward, to come through, more revelations to happen when Uranus enters Gemini. Right now, her Jupiter. Right now, Jupiter is in Gemini, but once Uranus enters Gemini along with Jupiter, more information, more memories will arise, considering that in her natal chart, Jupiter is conjunct to the moon, which is also, again, the moon also rules over memories. So maybe we will be able to get a glimpse into certain memories that are key memories to help us really understand what really happened to her decades ago, and how potentially pwede nating ma-resolve yung mga hindi na-resolve na dapat na-resolve back then because of the systemic oppression of politics, societal power, societal perspective, and delusions and distortions, lahat na. And by the way, Pepsi Paloma's North Node is in Taurus at 23 degrees. So really tells us talaga that she's willing to wait. You know, she's not rushing, but she's making sure that when she gets her moment, it's really gonna be her moment. I can go on and on and on and on about this chart. This actually makes a good case study. Her tragic life somehow makes a beautiful case study for anyone who wants to learn astrology. It makes it more easier to understand. And I feel like that's also one of her gifts to the world. Even if she did live a tragic life, may regalo pa rin siya sa humanity, and that's the lesson of her life story. And that's also like Jupiter ninth themes, which really means that we're meant to learn something from her life story if we can really understand it. But anyway, like I just really wanted to share this with you guys because I was really curious to see how astrology is very, very real. So even to this level, to this degree. So yeah, I just really wanted to look into the astro because I wanted to take this opportunity to understand why is this happening. The time we have is simply not enough to go through every single meaningful thing about her chart. And again, you know, I'm giving her soul the warmest of hugs because I know that these placements are quite challenging to have. You know, just sending warm hugs to wherever her soul is. I hope you enjoyed this rabbit hole with me, and I hope that you got something valuable from whatever this video is. I'm actually not sure what this is. I really just got the inspiration to do this video without planning for it. So I hope may nakuha kayo sa video na to. And yeah, I hope to see you in the next one.